Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift back into Rome. Not the marble statue Rome people like to polish in their minds, but the Rome that smelled like bread, sweat, cheap wine, smoke, damp stone, and whatever the Tiber decided to contribute that week. We're going to move slowly through ordinary hours, the kind that don't get carved into triumphal arches. And we'll stay with the people who didn't get to be immortal, only busy. And we're starting right where the day really begins for her. Not with a grand introduction, not with a lecture, just with the moment she opens her eyes and remembers immediately exactly what kind of day it is. She wakes before the sun is fully committed, in a room that is not really hers. The mattress is thin, the blanket is thinner, and the walls hold yesterday's voices the way stone always does. If she's lucky, the air is merely stale. If she's unlucky, it's sour with old wine, sweat, and the slow panic of too many bodies sharing too little space. Her first task is not romance, it's inventory. She checks what she still has: a comb, a bit of oil, a strip of cloth that can be washed and reused until it gives up, a cheap pin to hold hair up, maybe a small mirror, scratched enough to make everyone look slightly worse, which is honest at least. She touches her throat and counts the little bruises with the calm of someone counting coins. Rome is full of men who swear they're gentle and then behave like bulls who learned manners from other bulls. She sits up carefully because her body keeps records. It records nights, it records hands, it records pressure and weight and the way people treat things they've paid for. In Rome, payment makes men brave. It also makes them stupid. Sometimes it makes them both at once, which is the most efficient kind of stupidity. If she works out of a brothel, she is not alone. There are other women, shifting and coughing and rearranging themselves for another day. Some are young enough to still look surprised by their own exhaustion. Some have learned the art of not looking surprised at all. The older ones move with a particular economy, like they've stopped wasting energy on anything that won't keep them alive. There is usually a manager, a madam, a keeper. Call her what you want. Rome loves categories. This is the person who owns the keys, controls the schedule, controls the money, and controls the story everyone tells about why they're there. She might be a former worker herself. She might be a businesswoman with a talent for smiling while calculating. She might be cruel. She might be practical. She might be both, because Rome rarely requires you to choose just one. A woman washes, not luxuriously, quickly. Water costs effort, someone carries it, someone pays for it. Someone complains if you waste it. If the house is decent, there's a basin and a jug. If it's not, she uses what she can get and does her best not to think too hard about what clean means in a city where millions of people share streets. Baths and air. She oils her hair, she pins it up. She looks at her face in the scratched mirror and makes a decision about it. Today she will look softer or tougher, or more innocent, or more experienced. Rome rewards different masks depending on the client. Men want fantasies that match their mood. The same man might want sweetness one day and cruelty the next. Men, in general, are not consistent creatures. They are consistent only in believing their inconsistency is charming. If she has cosmetics, she uses them carefully, a little color to the cheeks, something for the eyes. Not too much if she wants to attract the men who think they prefer natural, the men who prefer natural are often the same ones who have no idea what natural looks like. Of course they are. Then comes clothing. Practical, worn, simple. She doesn't dress like a senator's wife. She doesn't dress like a goddess. She dresses like a worker. Because that's what she is. The fabrics are cheap. The seams are repaired if she has one decent garment. She saves it for the hours when better-paying men might appear. That's one of the quiet truths of the day. Not all clients are equal. Not in money, not in danger, not in smell, not in the way they talk when they think they have power. And the day begins with waiting. Rome is a city of rhythms. Markets open, bakers shout, donkeys complain. Slaves hurry, shopkeepers arrange their goods. The rich pretend they don't sweat. The poor sweat honestly. Our woman waits for the first flow of men who can afford to spend a little and still pretend they're respectable. If she works in a brothel, the house may open early. If she works the street, she positions herself carefully. Street work is visibility and risk. It is also autonomy sometimes, but autonomy is a delicate thing when the law. The gangs and the clients all have opinions about your body. If she works near a tavern, she listens to the voices first. Drunk men are loud. Sober men can be worse because they believe they are reasonable. A reasonable man can justify anything. A drunk man at least admits he's lost the argument with himself. Morning clients are often the ones who want it quick. A sailor between errands, a laborer who has been paid, a young man with a trembling confidence. Married man who insists he's only here because his wife is cold, as if wives are household appliances that malfunction out of spite. He comes in, eyes darting, pretending he's not nervous. He tries to speak casually. He tries to look like a man who does this often. He does not. His hands give him away. His voice cracks a little when he asks the price, as if he's bargaining at the market for olives instead of bargaining for a human being's time. She tells him the price. Calmly, like a list, like she's namming types of bread, he tries to lower it. He always tries to lower it. She lets him try for a moment, because sometimes letting a man think he's negotiating makes him feel powerful enough to behave. Then she repeats the price with the same calm tone and waits. If he pays, she counts the coin with her fingertips. If he doesn't, she looks past him, already scanning for the next one, because Rome does not reward sentiment. Some brothels are tightly controlled. The manager decides who sees whom. The manager watches the money. The manager enforces rules. There might be a bouncer, a slave, a hired strong man, someone whose job is to remind clients that payment does not include violence beyond the agreed limits. Not all houses have this. Some houses are simply rooms where violence happens quietly and no one calls it violence, because calling it violence would make everyone uncomfortable. The client leaves. He wipes his mouth. He adjusts his clothing. He tries to look like nothing happened. That's his favorite hobby. She washes again. She does not have time to be delicate. She has to be functional. There is a practical rhythm. Client, clean, breathe, reset, repeat. Rome is not romantic about labor. Rome is honest about labor in the sense that it expects you to do it until you break. Between clients. She watches the door. She listens to the street. She hears the city living. Rome is not silent, not ever. Even in quiet moments, there is a distant hum of voices, carts, footsteps, animals, and the constant low sound of a city chewing through its own day. Sometimes she speaks with the other women, short exchanges, who's been violent lately, who pays well, who smells like fish and thinks it's charming, which man is known for getting attached, which one is known for not paying. They trade information like it's bread, because information keeps you fed. The manager might call out a name, or a nickname, or just point. There is not always time for politeness. There is always time for money. Now around midday, the city changes flavor. The sun climbs. The streets heat up. People move toward shade. The baths become important. Roman baths are one of those things people like to describe as glamorous, because the wealthy had marble and the poor had steam and everyone had opinions. The baths were hygiene, social club, gossip exchange, business meeting, and occasionally a place where people pretended not to notice what they were noticing. For some sex workers, the baths are part of the day, not necessarily as clients, though clients can be found everywhere, but as workers managing appearance. Cleanliness is currency. A woman who looks cared for can charge more. That sounds cruel, but it's also how the market thinks. And Rome loved markets. Rome could turn anything into a transaction, especially bodies. If she goes to the baths, she does it with care. The baths are public. Public spaces are full of eyes. Eyes bring judgment. Judgment is dangerous when you are already marked. Because she is marked. In Rome, sex workers could be registered. There were legal categories. There were social categories. A respectable woman avoided being confused with a worker like her. Respectability is fragile. It shatters easily. So respectable women and men protected their respectability by pushing workers like her into clear visual signals. clothing, hair, behavior, the way you stand, the way you speak, where you are seen. Respectability, once again, choosing cruelty. She might be recognized, she might be sneered at, or worse, she might be treated like entertainment. Some people enjoy humiliating others when they know the others can't fight back. It's a simple pleasure for simple minds. In the baths she scrubs, she tries to get the smell of clients off her skin. The smell is not only physical, it's psychological too, but Rome has not invented a soap for that. She sits in steam and lets her muscles loosen, because tension is stored in her body like debt. Debt is another constant. Some women are enslaved into this work. They do not keep their money, they do not choose their clients, they do not choose anything. Their day is not theirs. It belongs to the owner, the keeper, the house. Free workers can still be trapped. Free, in Rome, often means you are free to starve, you are free to be evicted, you are free to owe money to people who will not accept excuses. Freedom is a nice word. Rome liked nice words. Rome used them to decorate realities it preferred not to stare at. If she has a patron, a regular man who pays for exclusivity or semi-exclusivity, her day can be different. He might provide housing, he might provide gifts, he might provide protection. He might also provide jealousy, control, and the constant threat that his affection is temporary. Men like this often believe they are rescuers. They like the feeling. They like saying they have saved someone. It makes them feel moral while doing immoral arithmetic. And then there are the higher-end workers, the ones who operate more like courtesans with more select clients, more performance, more time spent on conversation and atmosphere. They may be educated, they may play music, they may host banquets. Their work includes listening to political complaints and pretending they're fascinating, which, to be fair, is work. Those women have longer days in a different way. They must be charming, entertaining, emotionally responsive. They must make men feel brilliant. They must laugh at jokes that would die of shame if heard by intelligent people. They must flatter without making it obvious. They must maintain a sense of rarity. The more exclusive you appear, the more you can charge. Rome loves scarcity. Rome pays for scarcity. But our woman, the ordinary one, the one who wakes early and counts bruises, does not have the luxury of rarity. She has volume, she has repetition. She has the same small room, the same quick negotiations, the same wash basin, the same tired body. Afternoon brings another wave. Men who have eaten, men who have drunk, men who have finished some business and want a reward for being themselves. Men who are bored, which is always dangerous because bored men invent games. Sometimes a client wants to talk. He sits too long. He complains about his wife, or his mother, or his boss, or the gods. He treats her like a priestess of confession. He wants absolution without changing. He wants sympathy without giving any. He wants her to say he is good. She listens and nods and says what keeps him calm. She is not paid to be honest. Sometimes a client wants roughness. Sometimes he wants gentleness. Sometimes he wants to pretend he is powerful. Sometimes he wants to pretend he is powerless. Humans are creative creatures, and unfortunately, they often use that creativity in ways that make other humans tired. If she refuses certain acts, she risks losing money. If she agrees, she risks her body. Every day is a series of calculations, not moral calculations, survival calculations. Moral calculations are for people whose rent is secure. Now the law exists in the background like a bored guard. Roman law could regulate prostitution while accepting it as part of city life. It was tolerated, managed, taxed in some ways, condemned in speeches, consumed in practice. Rome enjoyed hypocrisy the way it enjoyed wine, publicly criticizing it while reaching for another cup. She may have to deal with officials, a clerk, a guard, someone who demands a fee, someone who threatens trouble. Sometimes the fee is coin, sometimes it's favor. There is always someone who thinks your vulnerability is an invitation. In the late afternoon, she eats if she can. Bread, olives, maybe cheese, maybe nothing. Hunger makes the day sharper. A hungry worker has less patience. Less patience can be dangerous. She needs to remain calm. Calm is protective. Calm is also exhausting. She watches the other women. She sees one with a swollen lip. She sees another with a glazed stare that means she's somewhere else. She sees a younger one trying to laugh too brightly, because brightness can be armor when you don't have anything else. She sees someone disappear upstairs with a man who looks like trouble, and she feels a tightness in her chest that she forces down, because fear is not productive unless it helps you move. Evening approaches. This is when Rome becomes louder. The taverns fill. The streets glow with torches and lamplight. The smell of cooking rises. The city turns toward leisure, which for many men means turning toward women like her. Evening clients can pay more. Evening clients can also be more dangerous. They drink. They travel in groups. They egg each other on. A group of men is always less intelligent than a single man. This is a law of nature. If a man wants to do something cruel, he brings friends so he can call it fun. Some brothels keep strict rules about groups. Some allow them because money is money. Some workers refuse and take the risk of punishment from the manager. Some cannot refuse. Choice is unevenly distributed in Rome. She adjusts her hair again. She wipes her face. She stands in a doorway or sits on a stool. She makes herself visible. Visibility is her job, even though it makes her feel exposed. She learns to look inviting while feeling wary. That split becomes normal. It becomes her default. It becomes her way of moving through the world. A client arrives who is better dressed. He smells of oil and expensive soap. He speaks with the careless confidence of a man who has never had to calculate his next meal. He looks her up and down as if he is inspecting a purchase. He asks a question like he's doing her a favor by noticing she exists. She answers with polite calm. He offers coin. The manager watches. The transaction proceeds. He might bring a friend. The friend laughs too loudly. The friend calls her something crude. The well-dressed man smiles like this is harmless. Of course he does. She takes them upstairs, or into a back room, or into whatever space has been assigned. The door closes. The city continues outside. When the door opens again, she breathes slowly and resets her face. She returns downstairs. She washes. She eats a bite if there is time. She waits again. This is the day, not one dramatic moment, not one big reveal, just repetition. That is what most lives are. Rome is built on repetition, water carried, bread baked, streets swept, bodies used, money counted. And yet within repetition, there are small human things. She might share a joke with another worker, dry and quiet, about a client who insisted he was a poet and then couldn't remember his own words. She might roll her eyes when a man says he has never done this before, because the city is full of men doing never for the 10th time. She might have a moment of tenderness for a younger girl who looks frightened, because fear in a young face is a mirror, and mirrors are tiring. Sometimes she dreams of leaving. She imagines a small room that is hers, a bowl of food that is guaranteed, a man who does not treat her like an object, or no man at all, just peace. She imagines a life where her body is not public property. The imagining is soft and dangerous, because if you imagine too hard, the contrast becomes unbearable. Night deepens, the flow of clients slows. The men who remain are often the worst ones, the drunk, the angry, the ones who stayed out because they have nothing to go home to, or because what they go home to does not satisfy them. She handles them carefully. She keeps her voice low. She keeps her movements controlled. She watches hands. She watches eyes. She watches moods. Eventually, the manager calls time, or the door is barred, or the last client staggers away. The house exhales. The women sit. They stretch sore muscles. They clean what must be cleaned. They count what they have earned if they are allowed to keep it. They hide coins if they fear theft. They speak quietly. They fall silent. A woman returns to her narrow room. She removes her clothing slowly because her skin is sensitive now. She wipes herself down again. She lies on the thin mattress. She stares at the ceiling. She listens to the building settle. She listens to distant voices fade. She listens to her own breathing and tries to make it steady. And just before sleep, when the day's noise finally loosens its grip, she has the small, private moment that belongs only to her. It might be a prayer. It might be a curse. It might be nothing at all, because sometimes nothing is safer than hope. She closes her eyes. And because Rome never really stops, because the city breathes even in darkness, because money and hunger and desire do not take days off, she already knows what tomorrow will look like, down to the basin, down to the bruises, down to the first nervous young man pretending he's casual. And she thinks, with a tired calm that almost feels like sarcasm, that of course this is what her life is, of course this is how the world has arranged itself. Because why not make everything harder for the people who are already exhausted? And that thought, soft and bitter and familiar, drifts with her into sleep, and she begins to dream of a room with a door that locks from the inside. A simple dream, an ordinary dream, and the dream starts to form in her mind as she imagines her hand turning the key slowly, carefully, as if she has all the time in the world, and she is still turning it when the sounds of the house shift, faint footsteps in a corridor. A murmur downstairs, the city's distant hum, and in the half-dark of her mind, she begins to think very quietly about what it would take to leave, who she would have to pay, who she would have to trust, what she would have to risk, and the thought grows, slow and heavy, as she wonders whether she could disappear into Rome the way other people disappear into it every day, whether she could become someone else, somewhere else. And she is still wondering whether when a new day begins to leak its pale light into the cracks of the building, and she opens her eyes again, the thin blanket pulled up, the air stale, the day waiting, and she inhales and starts to sit up, and her first movement is slow, careful, practiced, as she reaches toward the small basin and begins to lift the jug, already counting what she still has, already preparing her face, already arranging herself for another day of being seen, and she murmurs, almost without sound, that she should hurry because the first clients come early, and she starts to rise and begins to speak to the woman nearby in a low voice, beginning with the simple question of whether there is any oil left, whether anyone has seen her comb, whether the manager is awake yet, because the manager likes to be awake before everyone else, as if waking early makes exploitation feel more respectable. And she is still asking about the comb when the door downstairs creaks and a man's voice calls out, too loud for the hour, demanding service, demanding attention, demanding to be treated as if his impatience is urgent, and the women exchange a glance, tired and knowing, and our woman exhales slowly as she reaches for her dress, and her fingers find the fabric, and she begins to pull it over her shoulders, and her mouth opens to say something dry, something small, something meant only for the other women. And she whispers that Rome never lets anyone sleep in, and the whisper hangs for a moment, soft as breath, as she ties the garment and steps toward the doorway, and the day begins again, and she walks forward with the calm pace of someone who has learned that surviving is not about drama, it is about repetition, and she is still walking when the sound of coins clinks downstairs, and the manager's voice answers, and the house opens itself to another round of transactions, and our woman's eyes narrow slightly. Not in anger, not even in fear, but in that steady focus that comes from doing the same difficult thing for too long, and she reaches the top of the stairs and pauses and looks down toward the warm lamplight below, and she begins to descend, one step at a time, her hand sliding along the wall for balance, and as she descends she listens to the man's voice, already recognizing the type, already predicting the conversation, already preparing the price. And she is halfway down when she hears him say, with the casual entitlement of someone who believes the world exists for his comfort, that he hasn't got all day, and she almost smiles because that is the most ridiculous thing he could say in a place like this, where her entire life is made of other people's days, and she opens her mouth to reply, keeping her tone polite, keeping it calm, keeping it smooth, and she says softly that of course, everything can be arranged. And she is still saying arranged when the manager steps forward, and the man's eyes flick toward our woman, and his gaze lingers, calculating, and the day, once again, begins its slow work of turning human need into business, while outside the city wakes fully, and the markets open, and the baths steam, and the temples fill, and Rome carries on, indifferent and immense, as if it has never noticed the small lives it consumes, and our woman, stepping into the lamplight, begins to speak again. Starting with the price, slow and clear, coin by coin, and her voice, steady and unhurried, continues as she tells him what his money will buy, and what it won't, and she watches his face as he pretends to be offended, pretends to be powerful, pretends to be in control, and she waits, patient as stone, because she has learned that men like this always want to believe they are the ones making decisions, even when all they are doing is choosing between paying and leaving, and she is still watching him decide when the door opens again behind him and another man steps in, and another. The house fills with the early murmur of commerce, and the day rolls forward, and she begins to move toward the first room, and her hand reaches automatically for the basin, and her mind, in the quietest corner, keeps counting, keeps calculating, keeps surviving, and she steps through the doorway and begins, once more, the same careful work of making her voice gentle, her face calm, her body steady, while the city outside remains enormous and hungry and endlessly awake, and she starts to speak. Softly, beginning with the simple words that she will need the coin first, and she holds out her hand and waits, and the man, grumbling, begins to reach into his purse, and the coin lifts into the air, and she watches it closely as it begins to fall toward her palm, and in that small bright circle of metal she sees, briefly, the whole shape of her day and her next day and her next, and she closes her fingers around it, and her voice continues, calm and low. As she murmurs that he may follow her, and she turns, and the narrow corridor receives them, and the house breathes on, and the city breathes on, and her footsteps, muffled by worn stone and tired routine, carry her forward as she leads him into the room and begins to close the door, and the door moves slowly on its hinges, and the last sliver of corridor light narrows, and she is about to speak again, to begin the practiced words that keep men calm, when her mind, uninvited, offers a small memory of the locked door in her dream, and she feels for a moment the sharp sweetness of that imagined click, and the feeling passes because feelings do not pay, and she opens her mouth to speak, and her voice starts to form the next sentence as she says that he should be quick, because there are others waiting, and he laughs, and the laugh is careless, and the day continues, and she begins to guide him forward, and the sentence drifts on, smooth and steady as she tells him, very softly, that Rome always has others waiting, and she is still saying others waiting when she turns her head just slightly, not enough to look afraid, not enough to look kind, just enough to remind him that time is measured here in coin and patience is never free. He mutters something about how a man should not be rushed. She lets him have that sentence, because men love sentences like that, the kind that sound like principles but are really just tantrums in formal clothing. She moves with the steady rhythm she has learned, not fast. Fast makes men think they can grab. Fast makes men think the room is theirs. She moves just slow enough to keep control, just slow enough to keep him following, like a dog who believes he is walking you. When the door closes behind them, the city becomes quieter, as if Rome itself has stepped away to give them privacy. It hasn't. Rome does not give privacy. Rome sells the illusion of it. She does what she must. She says what keeps him calm. She watches his hands. She watches his face. She keeps her breath even because a man who senses fear can become curious about it, and curiosity is not always gentle. He tries to talk because some men fill silence with authority the way children fill silence with noise. He complains about his day. He complains about the price. He complains about how hard it is to be him. Of course he does. Being him is probably exhausting, what with all the constant being owed things. When he is done, he leaves quickly. Some men leave like thieves, as if the act itself has stolen something from them. Others linger, as if they've paid for the right to take up space. He adjusts his tunic. He clears his throat. He tries to look indifferent. His eyes avoid hers, then return to her, then avoid again. Shame makes people restless. Shame also makes them cruel. It depends on the man. She holds the door open just long enough for him to go. She does not push. She does not rush. She lets him walk out with his dignity intact, because a man with intact dignity is less likely to become violent in the corridor, and violence in the corridor is bad for business. The moment he is gone, she turns back to the basin. She washes her hands first, always hands first. Hands are what touch the door, touch the coins, touch the clothing, touch the skin. Hands carry the day. If she washes her hands, she can pretend she is washing the day off. It doesn't work, but it gives the mind something to do. She rinses quickly. She dabs herself with cloth. She checks the corner of her mouth for dryness. She smooths her hair. She exhales once, slow and controlled, like she is lowering a heavy jar to the floor without letting it crack. Then she steps back out into the corridor. The corridor smells of oil lamps, sweat, old plaster, and the faint sourness of cheap wine that never truly leaves. Another woman passes her going the other way. Their eyes meet briefly. No words, just a shared understanding that the day is moving and they must move with it. Downstairs, the manager is already counting coins. The manager's fingers are quick, practiced, not sentimental. She counts the way priests count prayers, except the prayers here are metal. A client's coin is weighed, judged, and filed away in the mind. A client who pays in small change is a different animal from a client who pays in larger pieces. A client who tries to pay late is the worst kind. Late payment is a man testing whether you are human or furniture. The manager glances up. Her eyes sweep our woman in the way a merchant sweeps a table of goods. Not hatred, not love, assessment. The manager asks in a flat voice whether the man was difficult. Our woman answers carefully. She learns to be honest in a way that is useful. He complains. He tries to bargain after paying. He drinks. He likes roughness. She does not say, "He scares me." Fear is not a category the manager sells. The manager nods. She files the man away in her mental ledger. The manager loves ledgers. Ledgers are control. Ledgers mean you can predict. And prediction is the closest thing to safety Rome offers. A new client is already at the door. This one is younger. He has that stiff posture of someone trying to grow into manhood by wearing it like armor. He looks around too quickly, taking in the room like he expects it to attack him. He tries to speak first, but his throat catches. He clears it loudly. It is not impressive. He thinks it is. He asks the price in a voice that tries to sound casual. It fails. Our woman gives the price, calm, clear. He hesitates. He looks at the coins in his hand like he is saying goodbye to friends. Then he pays quickly, as if speed can hide the decision. He follows her upstairs with the expression of someone walking toward a fate he pretends he chose. Some clients want illusion. This one wants instruction. He asks questions in a whisper, embarrassed by his own curiosity. He asks whether women like this. He asks whether she likes him. He asks whether she has been with many men. He asks if she remembers them. He asks, in the most painfully hopeful tone, whether she will remember him. Rome is full of people desperate to be remembered, even by strangers. She answers the way she has learned to answer, softly, comfortingly, not too much detail. Too much truth can break a man's fragile mood, and broken moods can become dangerous. When he is done, he leaves with his eyes down. He says thank you in a rush. It is almost sweet, almost. She washes again. This is what the day is made of, not one long event, a series of small contained interactions, each one requiring a separate mask. There are breaks, small ones, a bite of bread, a sip of water, a moment by a window if the house has one. She hears the street, sellers calling out figs, people arguing over prices, a donkey braying as if it has opinions about economics. The sun climbs, the air thickens, the house grows warm. At some point, she goes to the baths. Not every day, but often enough. The baths are a strange equalizer. Everyone sweats, everyone strips, everyone is flesh under the steam. But the equalization is temporary because people redress afterward and their clothing reminds them what they are allowed to be. She enters the baths with her head slightly lowered, her posture contained. She is careful. She knows where to look and where not to look. She knows which women will stare at her like she is dirt and which men will stare at her like she is food. She pays the fee. She steps into the warm air. Steam curls, voices echo, water splashes. Somewhere a man laughs too loudly, and the sound bounces off stone in a way that makes it feel even more careless. She scrubs herself. She scrubs until her skin is pink and tender. She scrubs because scrubbing is action, and action feels like control, and control is comforting. She watches her own hands moving, and for a moment she is almost detached, as if she is watching someone else wash. A woman nearby recognizes her, or thinks she does. The woman tilts her head. There's a faint smirk, the kind that carries judgment without needing words. Our woman keeps her face calm. She does not smile. She does not glare. She becomes stone. Stone survives. In the changing room, she dresses quickly. She keeps her clothing simple. She avoids drawing attention. Attention is expensive. On the way back, she passes a street where the smell of fresh bread is strong enough to be painful. A baker's stall is crowded. A child reaches for a roll and is slapped away. The slap is casual, like swatting a fly. Rome is not gentle with children. Rome is not gentle with anyone who cannot hit back. She returns to the house. Afternoon is slower sometimes, or it is busier. It depends on festivals, on paydays, on whether a nearby tavern is doing well, on whether a nearby merchant has been generous, on whether soldiers have returned with coin and boredom. The city's appetite shifts like wind. Soldiers are a category all their own. Some are young and restless, some are older and numb, some are respectful, some are brutal, many drink, many travel in pairs or groups, many treat the house like a reward for surviving orders they did not choose. Their resentment often looks for a target, and targets are easier to find when you are alone in a room with a man who believes his uniform makes him important. The manager watches soldiers carefully. A soldier who pays is welcome. A soldier who threatens trouble is a problem. The manager prefers problems that can be predicted. Our woman gets a soldier in late afternoon. He smells of leather and sweat and the road. His eyes are tired, not romantic tired, the tired of someone who has learned that life is mostly waiting and pain. He is quieter than most. That is oddly more unsettling. Quiet men can go either way. He pays without bargaining. That is a good sign. In the room, he does not talk much. He does what he came for, and when he is done, he sits on the edge of the bed and stares at the floor for a long moment as if he has forgotten how to leave. Then he stands, adjusts his belt, and says, very softly, that he hopes she eats tonight. It is the closest thing to kindness she will hear all day, and she does not know what to do with it. Kindness can be more confusing than cruelty, because cruelty fits the world she expects. Kindness suggests another world, and another world is dangerous to imagine. He leaves. She washes again. Evening approaches. This is when the work becomes more like performance. The lamps are lit. The house becomes warmer, louder. The corridor fills with footsteps. Voices rise and fall. The manager's face becomes more animated, her smile more practiced, her eyes sharper. Money is coming. Money makes everyone attentive. Some houses have rules about music. Some have a girl who sings, not always for pleasure, sometimes just to create the sense that this place is lively. A lively place attracts clients. A lively place also covers uncomfortable noises. Rome likes lively places for practical reasons. Clients come with different moods. One man comes in angry. He has lost money somewhere else. He wants to regain his sense of power by pushing it onto someone weaker. He complains about the price. He complains about the house. He complains about women. He complains about the gods. The manager assigns him to someone tougher, someone who can handle him, someone who knows how to keep a man from escalating by giving him just enough resistance to feel challenged, but not enough to feel humiliated. Managing men is a craft. A tired craft, but still a craft. Another man comes in giggling, drunk, with a friend. They are loud. They slap each other's shoulders. They call themselves brave. They call themselves kings. They call themselves whatever makes them feel larger than they are. Rome is full of tiny kings. The manager refuses them entry, not because she is moral, because loud drunk men attract attention, and attention attracts officials, and officials attract fees, and fees cut into profit. Morality is not part of the calculation. Profit is. The drunk men protest, then stagger away, insulted that the universe has rules. They will find another place. There is always another place. Late evening brings better-dressed men. These are the men who finish dinners and want dessert, as if human beings are courses on a menu. They arrive scented with oil and expensive soap. They speak with that lazy confidence of people who have never been told no in a way that matters. They like softer rooms. They like quieter women. They like the illusion of intimacy. They like to imagine they are patrons of art, not consumers of labor. Sometimes, these men want conversation more than anything. They sit and talk about politics, about elections, about their rivals, about their wives, about their sons, about their inheritance. Rome is full of family disasters, and wealthy families are particularly talented at them because wealth gives you the means to make your disasters elaborate. A man complains about his brother, how his brother wastes money, how his brother drinks, how his brother shames the family. He says this while sitting in a brothel, paying a woman who is not his wife to listen to him. The woman nods, as if this is reasonable. Her face stays calm. Inside, she probably thinks, yes, your brother sounds terrible, he should definitely stop. And you, of course, are a pillar of virtue, which is why you're here. because Rome always sends its most virtuous men to the most convenient rooms. He mentions his father, an old man clinging to life, refusing to die politely, refusing to hand over control. The man's voice tightens when he speaks of inheritance. Inheritance is a kind of bloodline obsession, not royal blood, perhaps, but family blood, family pride, family property, passed down like a curse you are expected to call a blessing. He mentions his wife, cold and distant, he says, as if she has become cold by accident, as if years of neglect and betrayal have nothing to do with it. He says she is too serious. He says she doesn't laugh. He says she doesn't understand him. He says this in the soft, wounded tone men use when they want sympathy for consequences they created themselves. Our woman listens. She murmurs the right sounds. She gives him the illusion of being understood. She does not argue. Arguing is unpaid labor, and it can get you hurt. When he is done, he pays extra. Extra payment is meant to buy guilt relief. He leaves feeling generous, which is his favorite way to feel. She washes again. The house continues. Somewhere in the city, a festival might be happening, or a public execution, or a speech, or a procession. Rome provides entertainment. It provides it loudly. But inside this house, the entertainment is quieter, repetitive, purchased in small increments. Time moves in the house differently. Outside, the moon climbs. Inside, lamps burn. Outside, people sleep. Inside, people work. Outside, the city's great families dream of their legacies. Inside, the city's forgotten women count coins and bruises and the hours until the door is barred. Near midnight, the manager's temper shortens. She wants to close. She wants her money counted. She wants her house quiet. She wants no incidents. Incidents are expensive. A client refuses to leave. He says he paid. He says he deserves more. He says the price was unfair. He becomes louder. The manager signals the bouncer. The bouncer appears, silent and broad. The client sees him and suddenly remembers manners. He leaves, muttering, "Rome is full of men who discover manners only when faced with consequences." A woman sits for a moment on a stool by the wall. Her legs ache. Her shoulders ache. She feels older than she is. She watches a younger girl pass by, eyes wide, face too bright, trying to be cheerful. The girl whispers a joke, something small about a client who couldn't untie his own belt without help. A woman snorts quietly just once, and the sound is almost laughter. Almost. That tiny moment matters, not because it changes anything, because it proves she is still human. Finally, the door is barred. The last client is gone, the lamps are lowered, the house quiets, the manager counts, the women return upstairs, the corridor empties, the building exhales. In her room, our woman removes her clothing slowly. She wipes herself down again. She rubs oil into sore skin. She lies back on the thin mattress. She stares at the ceiling and tries to make her mind stop replaying faces. Men's faces blur together after a while, like the city's noise. She tries to remember her own face as it looked before this life. She cannot quite hold it. She closes her eyes. And in that half-sleep space, that soft drifting place where thoughts loosen their grip, she thinks about leaving again. Not in grand terms, in small terms. How many coins would she need? Who could she trust? Where would she go? What would she do? Work is work, and Rome does not offer many gentle jobs for women without family protection. She could become a servant if someone would hire her. She could sell food. She could sell cloth. She could attach herself to a man. Attaching yourself to a man is just another kind of risk. Sometimes she thinks about marriage, not romance. Marriage as cover, marriage as security. But who would marry her with her status, with her registration, with her history written on her like ink? Rome has a long memory for women's shame and a very short memory for men's. She thinks about children. Some women in her position have children, some keep them, some cannot, some send them away, some lose them. Rome is full of sickly children, and the poor children suffer most. The rich children also suffer, just with better bedding and more formal lies. If she had a child, what would that child inherit? Not land, not a name, not protection. The city would inherit the child. The city always does. These thoughts drift through her like smoke, slow and soft, until her mind finally gives up and sleep takes her, not as comfort, but as a shut door. And then morning returns. The jug, the basin, the comb, the oil, the manager's voice downstairs, the first client too early, the same routine. But this morning, something is different. Not dramatic, not loud, just a small detail. A new girl has arrived. The girl is younger than most. Her hair is still arranged like someone cared yesterday. Her eyes are swollen from crying, but she has tried to hide it. She stands in the corridor clutching a small bundle of cloth, looking like a sparrow dropped into a cage of cats. The manager speaks to her in a brisk tone. The manager explains rules, payment, expectations, no screaming, no scratching, no arguing, smile when needed, wash quickly, don't waste oil, don't steal, don't bring trouble. The girl nods too fast. She agrees too fast. She tries to be obedient. Obedience is what frightened people reach for when they don't know what else to do. A woman watches the girl and feels something tight in her chest. Not pity exactly. Pity is too clean. It's recognition. It's the memory of her own first days, the confusion, the fear, the way the world suddenly became smaller and more expensive. The manager assigns the girl to a room. The girl's first client arrives before the girl has even learned where the basin is. He is not special. He is not rich. He is not kind. He is just a man with coin and impatience. He looks at the girl and grins, the way men grin when they sense vulnerability, and he says something crude that makes the girl flinch. A woman steps forward before she fully decides to. She tells the manager calmly that the girl should eat first, that the girl needs water, that the girl needs a moment to wash her face. She says it like a practical suggestion, not like protection. The manager narrows her eyes. The manager does not like softness. Softness slows business. But the manager also understands value. A girl who collapses is bad for profit. A girl who looks sick scares clients. A girl who cries too much attracts attention. The manager sighs, annoyed, and allows a short delay. A woman leads the girl toward the basin. She hands her the jug. She points to the cloth. She shows her quickly how to pin hair in a way that keeps it out of a client's grip. She does not explain it emotionally. She explains it mechanically. Mechanics are safer. The girl whispers, "Thank you," voice trembling. A woman shrugs slightly, as if it is nothing. She cannot afford to look like she cares. Caring can be exploited. Caring can be punished. Caring makes you visible. But she stays near the girl's door when the client finally goes in, not close enough to invite suspicion, just close enough that the corridor feels less empty. The bouncer stands further down, pretending to be uninterested, which is his own kind of professionalism. Time passes. The door opens again. The client leaves, smirking, adjusting his belt like a man who believes he has accomplished something. The girl steps out slowly, face pale, eyes unfocused. She looks older than she did an hour ago. That is how it happens. Rome compresses time in the cruelest way. A woman guides the girl back to the basin. She tells her softly to wash. She tells her to drink. She tells her to breathe without saying the word breathe, because words like that sound too tender. The girl asks, in a thin voice, whether it gets easier. Our woman pauses. She could lie kindly. She could lie brutally. She chooses the kind of truth that helps survival. She says quietly that you get used to it, not because it becomes good, because you learn how to move through it without breaking every time. She says you learn which men to fear and which to tolerate. She says you learn to keep your coin safe. She says you learn to keep your face calm. She says you learn, slowly, to separate your mind from your body when you need to, and then bring it back later when the room is quiet. The girl nods, eyes filling again. A woman hands her the cloth and turns away, because if she watches the tears too long, she might remember her own, and memory is dangerous. The day continues. Clients arrive, coins clink, the manager counts, the lamps burn, the basin fills and empties, the women move like shadows in a house built of routine. And as evening comes again, as the city outside shifts toward its louder pleasures, our woman finds herself watching the doorway more carefully than before, not for her own sake, but for the girl. She listens for certain tones. She watches for certain faces. She learns, once again, that even in a life shaped by transaction, people still form attachments, small and quiet, like roots finding cracks in stone. The girl will survive, maybe, or maybe she won't. Rome is not predictable in kindness, but our woman, exhausted and practical, has made a small decision without announcing it. She will teach the girl what she knows, not to save her. Saving is a grand word, just to keep her alive longer than the city expects. And that, in Rome, is almost rebellious. The lamps are lit. A group of men arrives, better dressed, louder, with the confidence of people who have never been denied anything important. The manager smiles. The bouncer shifts his weight. The women straighten their clothing. The house becomes attentive. Our woman watches the men and feels that familiar tightening in her gut, the quiet knowledge of what they can bring. One of the men points toward the new girl and says, with a grin that tries to look playful, that he wants the young one. The girl freezes. The manager's smile stays smooth. She is about to agree because agreement is what the house sells. A woman steps forward again, slow and calm, and says, in a voice that sounds polite but leaves no room for argument, that the young one is not well, that she is new, that she is reserved, that there are others available, and she gestures toward herself, toward another woman, toward anyone else. The man laughs. He says he has coin. He says coin buys choice. A woman looks at the coin in his hand and then looks at his face and says softly that coin buys time, not cruelty. And for a moment the corridor is quiet enough that you can hear the lamps hiss, and the man's grin tightens, and the manager's eyes flick toward the bouncer. And the bouncer takes one small step forward, not dramatic, not threatening, just present, and the man hesitates, recalculating the cost of insisting, and he opens his mouth to protest again. But his friend nudges him and mutters something about not making a scene, and the man, offended, decides to be magnanimous, because men love to frame retreat as generosity, and he waves his hand as if he is granting mercy, and he chooses another woman instead, and the house exhales, and the manager's smile returns fully, and business continues, and our woman, still calm, turns her head slightly toward the girl, and the girl's eyes meet hers, wide and grateful and frightened. And our woman gives the smallest nod, the kind that says nothing and yet says survive, and then she turns away before the moment can become too emotional, because emotions are heavy, and she has clients waiting, and she steps toward the next room, and her hand reaches for the basin again, and the day moves forward, slow and relentless, as the city outside keeps burning lamps and eating bread and worshipping gods, and pretending that everything is in order, while inside the narrow corridors of this house, women keep doing the quiet work that holds up Rome's public virtue like a painted wall, and our woman begins to speak again, low and steady, offering the price, offering the rules, offering the calm performance that keeps men from noticing how much of the city's comfort depends on people like her. And she is still speaking when the next client steps in, eyes already wandering, voice already impatient, and she holds out her hand for the coin, and waits, and the coin lifts and falls. And she closes her fingers around it, and in that small cold weight she feels the entire city pressing down, gentle and enormous, and she turns toward the room and begins, once more, the practiced work of keeping herself intact, and she is still turning when she hears the manager call her name again, not kindly, not cruelly, just as an instruction, and she answers without hesitation, because hesitation is expensive, and she steps forward, and her voice continues. Smooth and monotone friendly, as she says quietly that yes, of course, everything can be arranged, and she leads the man into the room, and the door begins to close, and as it closes she thinks, for just a second, of the girl's frightened face, and of her own first days, and of how Rome takes and takes and takes, and yet here she is, still standing, still moving, still teaching someone else how to stand, and that thought, small and stubborn, drifts through her mind as the last sliver of corridor light narrows, and she opens her mouth to speak again, beginning with the soft words that he must be quick, because there are others waiting, and he laughs and steps closer, and she keeps her face calm as she says very evenly that he should pay attention to what she says, because men who ignore instructions tend to regret it, and she is still saying regret it when he reaches out, and she shifts her weight, and her hand lifts. And the moment stretches, quiet and controlled, as she prepares to guide him, and to manage him, and to survive him, and her voice continues low and steady, as she begins to tell him exactly what his coin has bought, and exactly what it has not. and she pauses for the smallest breath before adding in that same calm tone that if he wants more, he will have to pay more, and if he wants to be rough, he will have to ask first. And he opens his mouth to argue because men love arguing. And she watches his face with the tired patience of someone who has heard every version of male entitlement, and she begins to respond, starting with the quiet line that the price is the price, and Rome does not change its mind just because a man has decided he is special. And she is still saying special when the client's expression tightens, and he mutters something under his breath, and she keeps her voice even as she replies softly that he can always leave if he prefers. And the offer hangs in the air like a test, and the man hesitates because leaving would mean admitting the house has rules, and admitting rules is hard for someone who thinks money is a crown, and he finally grunts and nods, and she turns slightly, getting him further into the room, and the lamp on the wall flickers gently, and the city outside keeps turning, and the day keeps rolling forward, unromantic and steady, while she continues speaking in that low, monotone-friendly rhythm. And the sentence carries on, smooth and unbroken, as she tells him to sit. To wait, to keep his hands to himself until she says otherwise, and he sits reluctantly, and she reaches for the basin one more time, and the water shifts in the bowl, and she dips the cloth, and she begins to wipe her hands, and as she wipes she feels the quiet exhaustion settle into her bones again, the kind that does not scream, the kind that simply stays, and she thinks, briefly, that Rome must be proud of itself, building temples and forums and laws. All while requiring rooms like this to keep men from noticing how hollow their triumphs feel when the lamps go out, and that thought drifts, slow and dry, through her mind as she turns back to the client and begins to speak again, starting with the simple instruction that he must hand over the rest of the coin now, not later, not after now, and she holds out her hand and waits, and the client, grumbling, reaches into his purse again, and the coins begin to clink softly as he counts them out. And she watches each one fall toward her palm, and in the soft repetitive sound she hears the rhythm of the city itself, steady and indifferent, and she closes her fingers around the last coin and begins to lift her gaze to his face, and she opens her mouth to say the next line, the next calm rule, the next practiced phrase, and she begins, very quietly, to tell him that if he wants her to smile, he should remember that smiling is work too. And she is still saying work too when the lamp flickers again and the room's warm air shifts, and the client leans forward, and she shifts her stance, and her voice continues, low and even, as she prepares to guide him through the same routine again, and again and again, because routine is what keeps you alive, and she is still getting him when she hears, faintly through the wall, the new girl laughing once, a small surprised laugh, like a sound she didn't mean to make. And our woman pauses for half a heartbeat, and then continues, because there is no time to pause, but the sound stays with her, soft and strange, and as she speaks to the client she finds herself thinking, without quite admitting it, that if the girl can still laugh even once, then maybe the city hasn't taken everything yet, and she keeps speaking and keeps moving and keeps surviving, while Rome outside continues to pretend it is built only on marble and law. And not on the quiet, repetitive labor of people whose names will never be carved anywhere, and she begins to say something else, something dry and small, as she looks at the client and tells him, softly, that Rome is full of men who think they own the night, and yet the night always seems to take its payment first, and she is still saying payment first, when she lets the words settle in the air, not as a threat, not as a joke. Just as a fact delivered in the same tone you used to describe the weather. The client huffs, offended that reality has boundaries. Then he nods anyway, because he is here, and being here means agreeing, at least temporarily, that someone else has rules. He leans forward again, and she watches his eyes the way you watch an animal's ears. Small movements matter, a sudden tightening at the jaw, a glance toward the door, a twitch of impatience in the fingers. Men like him want control, but they also want permission to behave badly. If you give them too much permission, they become bold. If you give them none, they become angry. So she gives them a narrow path, just wide enough to walk without stumbling, and just narrow enough that she can push them back if they try to run. Outside, Rome continues its evening like nothing is happening. Somewhere, a family is eating dinner. Somewhere, a wife is pretending not to notice the empty couch beside her. Somewhere, a father is lecturing a son about virtue with the steady confidence of someone who has never met himself honestly. Somewhere, a slave is carrying water upstairs and thinking about nothing at all, because thinking is a luxury when your arms are tired. Inside, the room is warm. The lamp has that oily smell. The air is close. The client talks again, not because he has anything meaningful to say, but because silence makes him feel small. He says he is a businessman. He says he knows value. He says he can tell when someone is trying to cheat him. He says this while paying for a service that is entirely built on pretending to feel things on command. She nods, as if his insights are profound. Men like this love being agreed with. Agreement makes them feel like they have discovered truth rather than purchased comfort. He asks her name. She gives him a name that is not her real one, or maybe it is. In this house, names are flexible. Names are tools. Names can be dangerous if they're too true. Some men get attached to names. Some men try to use names later, in the street, in the baths, in public, as if recognition makes them important. He says her name back, slowly, enjoying the sound of it as if he has earned it. She keeps her face calm. When he is done, he leaves with a satisfied exhale, the sort of exhale that suggests he believes he has just fixed something in his soul. Rome is full of men who think a purchased hour counts as self-care. It's adorable in a grim way. She washes again. The basin water is cooler now. The cloth is rougher. The day is dragging toward its end, but end is always temporary. There is always another client. There is always another coin. She steps into the corridor and hears the house's noise shift. Not loud, not dramatic, just a subtle tightening. The manager's voice drops. The bouncer's footsteps become more frequent. One of the women mutters under her breath. A pair of officials has appeared downstairs. Not the kind that arrive with swords drawn and speeches prepared. Rome rarely wastes energy on theater unless it's being paid for. These are the small officials, the ones who carry tablets, the ones who know everyone's categories, the ones who pretend they're enforcing order while quietly collecting the price of looking away. They stand near the door with the bored expressions of men who have seen every version of human weakness and are now mostly interested in lunch. One of them scratches his cheek as if he is thinking. He is not thinking, he is calculating. The manager approaches with her practiced smile. She greets them warmly, like old friends who can ruin you, which are the most educational kind. They exchange words, polite, flat, familiar. The official says he has had complaints. Noise, disorder, men spilling into the street. He says this without looking directly at anyone, because looking directly would suggest sincerity. The manager apologizes. She says of course she wants peace. Of course she respects the city's rules. She says she will remind the women to be quieter. She says she will remind the clients to behave. She says this with the calm of someone who knows men do not behave because they have been reminded. The official nods slowly as if he is being convinced. Then he mentions a fee, a small fee, just enough to cover the trouble of his visit, just enough to show good faith, just enough to remind her who is allowed to pretend this is about order. The manager hands over the coins without blinking. She has already budgeted for it. Bribes are like oil. You don't like paying for them, but things squeal horribly without them. The officials leave. The house exhales again. The bouncer shifts back into stillness. The corridor noise returns to its usual hum. The women move again. A woman watches all of this and thinks, in that dry, sleepy way her mind has learned, that Rome truly is a masterpiece. A city that can build aqueducts and temples and roads and still require a bored man with a tablet to be paid, so women can continue doing the work everyone publicly condemns and privately consumes. Efficiency, really. Evening continues. A richer client arrives, and the manager's posture changes. The manager becomes softer in the face, sharper in the eyes. This is a man who might pay extra. This is a man who might bring trouble of a different kind, jealousy, entitlement, the sense that money buys not only time but loyalty. He wants the new girl again. The manager's smile tightens. The manager knows the girl is fresh, which means profitable, which means dangerous. Freshness attracts men like blood attracts flies. The manager wants to sell it, but she also wants to keep the girl from breaking too quickly because broken goods are bad for income. A woman feels that familiar tightening in her chest again. She watches the girl's face go pale. She sees the girl's hands clench around her cloth bundle like it's a shield. Our woman steps forward, but this time she chooses a different approach. She does not challenge the man directly. Direct challenge makes men itch. It makes them want to win. Instead, she suggests something else. Calmly, smoothly, she tells the manager in a voice that can be heard that the young one is reserved for later, for a higher fee, for a special arrangement, and that tonight she herself is available, experienced, discreet, no trouble. She makes herself sound like the safer purchase. The man squints at her. He is deciding whether he wants novelty or comfort. Men often say they want novelty. Many actually want comfort with a different face. He hesitates. He asks the price for her. She names it. The manager watches, eyes flicking between them like a merchant watching a negotiation. The manager does not care who goes where as long as money flows and no one bleeds on the stairs. The man agrees. He follows our woman upstairs, slightly annoyed, as if he is settling. Our woman keeps her face calm. Being someone, settling, is still safer than being their obsession. In the room, he talks about his wife. Of course, he does. He says she is distant. He says she is too serious. He says she is always surrounded by family, by servants, by children. He says he never gets time alone. He says he has needs. He says this with the wounded dignity of a man describing famine while holding a full plate. Our woman listens. She nods. She gives him the soft words that make him feel forgiven for being himself. When he is done, he pays extra. He says it's because she was kind. It is almost funny. She is being paid to be kind. The kindness is a product. He buys it and then thanks her for having it, as if she grew it naturally in her chest like a fruit. He leaves. She washes again. Downstairs, the manager counts the extra coin and smiles, briefly, with real satisfaction. The manager likes extra coin. Extra coin makes everything feel more manageable. Extra coin also makes her feel powerful, which is the closest thing to joy some people get. A woman notices, as the hours drift, that the new girl has stopped crying, not because she feels better, because crying is exhausting and exhaustion eventually wins. The girl moves now with stiff obedience. She listens to instructions. She washes. She pins her hair. She answers clients in a thin voice. She becomes quieter. Quiet is what the house likes. Quiet is also what breaks people slowly. Near the end of the night, when the last few clients are the ones who stayed out too late, the new girl sits on the edge of a bench and stares at her hands. Our woman sits beside her for a moment, not touching, not making it tender, just being there. Presence is the only kind of kindness that doesn't cost extra. The girl whispers, barely audible, that she wants to go home. Our woman asks, in the same calm tone, where home is. The girl shakes her head. Home is not a place. Home is a feeling. Rome does not guarantee feelings. Our woman says quietly that the city is large. You can disappear in it. People do it every day. She does not say it like a promise. She says it like a possibility. Possibilities are dangerous, but sometimes they are the only thing that keeps a person standing. The girl looks at her with a flash of hope that is almost painful to witness. Our woman adds carefully that disappearing costs money. It costs timing. It costs trust. Trust is the hardest part. Rome sells trust in small doses and usually waters it down. The girl nods slowly, and the hope dims into something more practical. The manager calls from downstairs, another client, the last one maybe. Our woman stands. She tells the girl softly to keep her coins hidden, to keep her mouth closed in the baths, to never follow a man outside alone, to watch the manager's moods, to watch the officials, to watch everything. She says it like instructions for cooking. The girl whispers, "Thank you again." Our woman shrugs, again, as if it is nothing. Then she goes. Because going is what she does, over and over, quietly, efficiently, like the city itself. The last client is not rich. He is not young, he is not kind, he smells of sour wine and sweat. He is the kind of man who reaches for comfort because he cannot handle being left alone with his thoughts. His thoughts probably deserve it. He pays in small coins, counted slowly, each one placed into her palm with exaggerated care, as if he is proving he is fair. Men like this love to feel fair. It distracts them from all the ways they are. In the room, he speaks about his mother. It is always someone's mother. He says she nags. He says she prays too much. He says she thinks he will die if he goes outside without a scarf. He says this with irritation, but his eyes soften in a way that suggests he has never been loved by anyone else quite as stubbornly. He complains about her and then, without noticing, defends her in the same breath. People are complicated even when they are unpleasant. Our woman listens, she nods, she murmurs. He finishes and leaves, and the door closes, and the house is suddenly quieter. The manager bars the door. The lamps are lowered. Coins are counted. The women go upstairs. Our woman washes one last time, even though the water is nearly gone and the cloth is stiff. She lies down. She stares at the ceiling. She listens to the building settle. The new girl whispers from the next room, asking if she is awake. Our woman answers softly that yes, she is awake. The girl asks, in a voice that tries to sound casual, how much money it takes to disappear. Our woman thinks for a moment. Then she names a number, not precise, not official, just the kind of number that includes bribes, food, lodging, and the cost of being unseen. The girl inhales, sharp. The number is bigger than her hope wanted. A woman adds, quietly, that it can be done for less if you are lucky. Luck is a strange god in Rome. People talk about gods constantly, but most of their lives are controlled by coin and timing. The girl is silent for a while. Then she whispers that she will start saving. A woman closes her eyes, and in the darkness, she feels a small, strange sensation in her chest, not happiness, something quieter, the sense that one small plan exists in a place built to crush plans. Outside, Rome sleeps and wakes and sleeps again. Inside, the house breathes. And our woman drifts towards sleep, thinking dryly that perhaps the gods are too busy watching emperors and generals to notice a girl saving coins in a brothel corridor. But if the gods have any sense of irony at all, they should be paying attention, because nothing is more Roman than a grand city held up by invisible labor and quiet bargains. And nothing is more human than the stubborn decision to try anyway, even when the odds are ugly. And she is still thinking about odds when her mind slides into dreams, and in the dream she sees a narrow alley opening into sunlight, and she sees a door that locks from the inside, and she hears, faintly, the click of a key, and she reaches toward it, and her fingers brush the metal, and she begins to turn it slowly, carefully, as if she finally has time, and she is still turning it when a sound from downstairs, soft, real, unavoidable, threads into her sleep. The sound of the manager's voice calling out early again, the sound of a client arriving too soon, the sound of coins clinking and her eyes open, and morning returns, and she inhales and sits up, and her first movement is toward the basin, because the day begins with the same small rituals, and the basin water trembles as she lifts the jug, and she begins to pour, and as the water falls, she hears the new girl stirring next door, and she hears the girl whisper to herself that she will save. She will save, and our woman, half awake and already tired, lets a small, almost imperceptible smile form and fade as she thinks, with that sleepy sarcasm that keeps her sane, that of course Rome would make freedom something you have to buy one coin at a time. And she wipes her face with the cloth and reaches for the oil, and steps toward the corridor, and the corridor receives her, and the house opens again to another day of men with needs and excuses. And she begins to descend the stairs, one step at a time, her hand on the wall, her voice preparing itself into calm, and she is halfway down when she hears a new voice at the door, a man speaking with the confident tone of someone who has legal authority, and the manager's voice answering with polite caution. And our woman's eyes narrow slightly as she recognizes the difference between a board tablet official and a man who actually intends to look around, and she pauses on the step, listening. As the man announces that there will be an inspection, and the manager laughs lightly, too lightly, and says of course, they have nothing to hide, and our woman feels that familiar tightening in her gut, because inspections never mean nothing. Inspections always mean a fee, a threat, a chance for someone to prove power, and she takes another step down, slower now, listening as the man's sandals scrape the floor and he moves inside, and the house's morning hush shifts into a careful silence. And our woman begins to speak quietly to the girl behind her, telling her, without turning her head, to stay upstairs, to keep her coins hidden, to say nothing, to let the manager handle it. And the girl whispers that she understands, and our woman continues downward, her face calm, her posture controlled, as she steps into the lamplight and sees the inspector standing near the doorway, scanning the room with an expression that is not bored at all, and she watches his eyes move over the women, over the corridor, over the ledger table, and she feels with a slow sinking certainty that this man is here not just for a fee but for leverage, and she begins to calculate immediately who in the house is most vulnerable, who might be taken, who might be registered, who might be punished for disorder that men paid to create. And she is still calculating when the inspector turns his head and looks directly at her, and his gaze lingers, and he opens his mouth to speak, and our woman's mind, already tired, already alert, begins to prepare her voice into polite calm as she starts to answer, beginning with the soft words that yes, of course, how may they help him today? And she is still saying help him today when the inspector's lips curl into the faintest smile, and he replies that he has heard there is a new girl in the house, and that he would like to meet her, and our woman's stomach tightens, and she keeps her face smooth as she begins to respond, starting with the careful line that the girl is unwell, that the girl is resting, that there is no need, and the inspector's smile stays fixed as he says calmly that there is always a need when the law is concerned, and the manager's eyes flick toward the stairs, and the bouncer shifts his weight, and the air in the room thickens, and our woman, still calm on the outside, begins to think very quickly and very quietly about what it might cost to make this man look away, and whether the house has enough coin to buy that kind of blindness. And she is still thinking about coin when the inspector takes a slow step toward the stairs, and the wooden steps creak softly under his sandal, and our woman moves, just one step, into his path, her voice low and steady, as she begins to say that perhaps they can discuss this downstairs, that perhaps there is no need to disturb anyone, that perhaps he would prefer a small gesture of appreciation for his time, and the word appreciation hangs in the air, polite and poisonous. And the inspector looks at her and considers, and for a moment the room holds its breath, and our woman keeps her posture relaxed, her hands visible, her expression neutral, as if she is offering nothing more than courtesy, and she is still holding that calm when the inspector tilts his head and says, in the same mild tone, that courtesy is welcome, but that he prefers to see things for himself, and he steps again toward the stairs, and our woman begins to speak once more, starting with the quiet insistence that the girl is not presentable, that the girl is resting, that the house will comply with any reasonable request, and the inspector's hand lifts slightly as if to dismiss her words, and he continues upward, and the stairs creak again, and the new girl's door upstairs remains closed, and in the silence our woman hears, faintly, the girl's breathing, and she feels the day tightening around them, and she starts to move after him, her steps slow, careful, her mind already searching for the next move, the next coin, the next lie that might keep the girl unseen, and she is still moving when the inspector reaches the landing and extends his hand toward the door, and the wood groans softly as his fingers touch it, and he begins to push, and our woman's voice rises just enough to be heard as she says, very calmly, that if he opens that door, he will have to explain to certain men why he is interfering with property that is profitable. And the threat is still polite, still wrapped in respect, but it is there, and the inspector pauses and turns his head slightly toward her, and his eyes narrow, and he begins to answer. And his answer begins with the words that profitable men have many interests, and the law has many friends too, and he is still speaking when the door shifts under his hand and begins to open, and the first sliver of the room beyond appears, and our woman's heart, steady until now, gives one slow, heavy thud. And she prepares to act, to speak, to bargain, to do whatever the moment requires, and she steps closer, and her mouth opens to form the next sentence, and she begins, in the calmest voice she can manage, to say that the girl is a minor matter, that there are bigger matters in Rome, that surely his time is valuable, that surely they can reach an understanding, and she is still saying reach an understanding when the door opens wider and the inspector's gaze slides into the room, and the new girl, frozen inside, lifts her eyes in panic, and our woman feels the air go cold despite the lamps, and the inspector inhales as if savoring the moment, and he begins to speak again, this time addressing the girl directly, and he starts with the quiet, terrible politeness of someone who knows exactly what he is doing, and he says her name, because someone has already told him her name. And the girl flinches, and our woman's mind races, and she reaches into the pocket where her coins are hidden. Already counting what she can offer, already calculating whether money will be enough, and she is still counting when the inspector smiles and says that he expects the girl to come downstairs at once, and the girl's lips part as if to answer, and no sound comes out, and our woman steps forward again, closer now, her voice still low but firmer as she begins to say that the girl will not be going anywhere without the manager's permission, without proper paperwork, without witnesses. And the inspector's smile fades into something flatter, and he replies that paperwork can be arranged, that witnesses can be found, that permission is not required when the law decides to take an interest, and he reaches his hand toward the girl as if he is reaching for a parcel, and our woman's breath tightens, and she begins to speak again, starting with the quiet line that Rome has a way of remembering men who overreach, and that even officials can find themselves suddenly without friends. And the inspector's eyes flick toward her, sharp now, measuring her, and the moment stretches and the air holds, and the girl's breathing becomes audible, and our woman keeps her face calm, her shoulders relaxed, as if she is merely making conversation, while inside she is bracing for whatever comes next. And she is still bracing when the inspector draws back his hand slightly and says, in a voice still mild, that he admires loyalty, that loyalty is rare, that loyalty can be expensive, and that perhaps the house would like to pay for its loyalty today. And our woman feels the calculations settle into place, heavy and familiar, and she begins to answer, starting with the soft words that they are always willing to show appreciation for reasonable discretion, and her hand tightens around the hidden coins as she prepares to name a price, and the inspector watches her with calm patience, waiting for her offer, waiting for her to buy the girl's invisibility one coin at a time. And our woman opens her mouth to speak, and the sentence begins to form as she says, very quietly, that perhaps they can settle this now quickly before the morning becomes inconvenient for anyone. And she is still saying inconvenient for anyone when she holds her voice steady, careful to keep it sounding like a reasonable offer between adults, not like panic wrapped in grammar. The inspector's eyes rest on her hand, not because he can see the coins, but because he can see the tension that coins always cause. He says softly that inconvenience is exactly what he is paid to manage. It's a beautiful sentence. It means nothing. It means everything. Rome is built on sentences like that, sentences that sound official while quietly pointing to a purse. Downstairs, the manager has stopped smiling. The manager's smile is a tool, and tools are put away when you might need both hands for something else. The bouncer stands still, shoulders heavy, face blank. He is ready for violence if it becomes necessary, but everyone in the house would prefer it doesn't. Violence attracts attention. Attention attracts more officials. More officials attract more fees. The city's appetite for fees is endless. You could feed it all your coins, and it would still ask what's for dessert. A woman keeps her stance relaxed. She keeps her chin level. She does not glance at the girl, because glancing would admit where her weakness is. In this moment, weakness has a price tag. She says quietly that she can pay. The inspector lifts his eyebrows in a mild way, as if he is impressed by her courage. He is not impressed. He is amused. Amusement is what men like him use instead of shame. He asks just as quietly how much. Now we come to the real work of the day, the work that does not involve a room and a door and a basin, the work of bargaining with authority, the work of measuring risk, the work of deciding what you can afford to lose. She names a number. Not a desperate number. Desperate numbers insult men like him. Desperate numbers make him think you will pay more. She names a number that sounds like a business proposal. Reasonable, clean, almost respectable. The inspector makes a small clicking sound with his tongue, the sound of a man tasting wine and pretending he has standards. He says it is not enough. He says his time is valuable. He says there are regulations. He says there are records. He says the city is concerned. He says many things that all mean the same thing: pay me more. A woman does not argue. Arguing is also expensive. She raises the offer slightly, as if it is nothing, as if coin is merely a detail in her day. She tries to make it look easy. Easy is convincing. Easy makes men believe they are dealing with someone who understands how the world works. The inspector watches her face. He is not watching to see if she is lying. He is watching to see how far he can push before she breaks. Breaking is where the real profit is. A man like this doesn't want your first offer. He wants the moment you realize you have no choice. The new girl stands frozen in the doorway, eyes too wide, breath too shallow. She looks like someone who has been told the world has rules and is now watching the rules be sold off in real time. Her mouth opens slightly, but she says nothing because she has learned in a single day that speaking rarely helps. The manager calls up from below, voice tight, asking if everything is under control. Our woman answers without looking away from the inspector. She says, calmly, yes, everything is under control. It's almost funny, it is never under control, but saying it out loud is part of the ritual, like prayer, like pretending. The inspector sighs as if he is being burdened by her offer. He says softly that perhaps he could be persuaded. Perhaps, if the house truly appreciates discretion, if the house understands the value of cooperation. Our woman nods. She reaches into her pocket slowly so he can see the movement and feel the satisfaction of being paid. She places the coins into his palm one by one. The sound is soft, but in this quiet landing it feels loud, like a tiny bell ringing for every compromise she has ever made. He closes his fingers around the coins. He does not count them in front of her because he wants to look above counting. He counts later. Men like him enjoy pretending they are not greedy while being nothing else. He says, in the same mild tone, that he will forget the girl exists. The girl exhales shakily. Our woman keeps her face calm because relief can look like weakness too. The inspector adds, still mild, that this forgetfulness is temporary. He says he expects continued cooperation. He says he may return. He says he hopes the house will remain orderly. Then he turns and walks down the stairs with the quiet confidence of someone who has just earned money without sweating for it. The bouncer steps aside to let him pass. The manager's face reassembles into a smile as he reaches the door, because smiles are what you give power as it leaves, like a polite escort out of your life. The door closes. The house is still for a moment. Then the manager's voice rises, sharp now, not loud but edged. She calls our woman down, immediately. Our woman descends. The manager stands by the ledger table, fingers tapping. The tapping is her anger trying to find a place to go. She asks, in a flat tone, what our woman thinks she was doing. She asks if our woman understands what coins cost. She asks if our woman thinks she runs this house. She asks if our woman has decided to become a hero. Our woman answers carefully. She says the man would have taken the girl. She says the man would have returned. She says the man would have created trouble. She says trouble costs more than coins. The manager narrows her eyes. The manager hates being argued with. The manager also hates losing money. But the manager understands arithmetic, and arithmetic is harder to insult than emotion. The manager says, finally, that the girl will pay it back. Our woman's stomach tightens. The manager says it like a simple fact. The girl is new. The girl is an investment. Investments pay returns. The manager does not speak like a villain. She speaks like a merchant. Merchants can be kinder than villains sometimes, but they can also be colder because they do not hate you. They simply do not care. Our woman looks toward the stairs, where the girl is still standing, half hidden, trying to make herself small enough to vanish. The girl has heard. The girl's face goes pale again. Our woman says nothing. There is nothing to say. The manager has decided, and the manager's decisions shape the day the way the sun shapes shadows. The manager turns back to the ledger. She makes a mark, a small scratch on a tablet, an entry in a book. The girl is now in debt. Debt is one of Rome's favorite chains. It is quiet, it is legal, it is socially acceptable, it is, in its own way, elegant. The day continues. Clients arrive. Coins fall. Rooms open and close. But something has shifted. The new girl moves differently now. She is no longer only frightened. She is frightened and trapped. Trapped fear becomes a different thing. It becomes quieter, heavier, more serious. It makes the eyes look older. It makes the mouth stop trying to smile. A woman watches her, and the small plan of saving coins becomes sharper in her mind. Saving is no longer just hope. It is necessity, because now the girl cannot leave until the debt is paid, unless she leaves in a different way, the way people leave when they don't have permission. Rome has many exits. Some are doors, some are rivers. Afternoon drifts into evening again. The house fills. The manager's smile returns to full strength. The bouncer's posture stays steady. Officials do not return, not today. But the memory of that hand on the door remains in the air, like a faint smell you can't wash out. A richer client arrives and asks for the young one again. The manager, smiling, says the young one is available for a higher price. The man pays, annoyed, but he pays. The manager glances at the ledger. The manager knows exactly where the extra coin will go, not to the girl's comfort, to the girl's debt. The girl goes upstairs, face blank. A woman wants to follow, not to rescue, because rescuing is a large word and large words get people hurt. But to be near, to be present in the corridor, to be a wall the girl can lean against if she comes out shaking. She stands outside the door, pretending to adjust her hair. She listens to the muffled sounds inside, not dramatic, not screaming, just the ordinary noises of a transaction, the kind that would sound harmless if you described them without context. A bed creaking, a man speaking, a pause, a small whimper quickly swallowed, the sound of clothing shifting. Rome loves contexts that make harm look ordinary. The door opens. The man steps out, satisfied. He looks at our woman and smirks, as if he expects approval from the staff of the building that served him. Our woman nods politely. The polite nod is another mask. It is the mask that keeps men from feeling challenged. Challenged men seek revenge. The girl steps out behind him, hair slightly undone, face pale, eyes unfocused. Our woman guides her toward the basin. Our woman tells her softly to stop before she breaks the skin. Broken skin gets infected. Infection is expensive. The girl whispers, in a flat voice, that she is now worth more. Our woman pauses. Then she says quietly that the manager will say that. The clients will say that. The officials will say that. Men always like to talk about worth, as if worth is something they can measure with their fingers. The girl stares into the basin water, watching it ripple. She whispers that she wants to disappear tonight. Our woman's throat tightens. Tonight is dangerous. Tonight is impulsive. Tonight is a word people say when they are desperate. A woman says softly that disappearing requires planning. It requires coin. It requires timing. It requires a place to sleep where no one asks questions. It requires getting out of the house without being noticed. It requires not being caught in the street by men who have opinions. The girl says, in the same flat voice, that she does not care. A woman hears, in that sentence, the edge of something that could become fatal, not dramatic fatal, quiet fatal, the kind that looks like an accident to people who prefer not to look. She says calmly that caring is annoying, but it keeps you alive. The girl's mouth twitches, almost a smile, almost not. They are interrupted by the manager's call. Another client. Time is money. A woman squeezes the girl's shoulder once, quick and light, not emotional, just a signal, stay. Then she turns and goes to work again. Hours pass. Clients change. Coins clink. The manager counts. The bouncer watches. The lamps burn lower. Near midnight, the house slows. The last clients drift in and out. The manager bars the door. The women go upstairs. In the corridor, the girl waits for our woman. The girl whispers that she has 3 coins hidden, not many, but it is a start. Our woman nods. She tells the girl to keep them in 2 places, not one. If one is found, the other might survive. The girl asks, barely audible, if our woman will come with her. This is the moment where a softer person might say something dramatic, a vow, a promise, a speech. Our woman is not soft in that way. Soft speeches get you killed. She says quietly that she cannot leave yet, not because she is loyal to the manager, because she has her own debts, her own hooks in the city, her own routines that have become chains. The girl's face falls. A woman adds carefully that she can help the girl plan, she can help her choose a night, she can help her choose a route, she can tell her which streets are watched, which baths are safe, which taverns to avoid. She can do this without being seen doing it. The girl nods slowly. That is the bargain they make, a small one, a private one, not sanctioned, not legal, just human. They lie down in their rooms. The house quiets. Rome breathes outside. And in the darkness, our woman starts to think like a planner rather than a survivor. The shift is subtle. It is not heroic. It is practical. She counts the guard patterns. She counts the manager's moods. She counts the times officials visit. She counts the nights when the city is loud enough to hide footsteps. She counts the festivals when crowds spill into streets and faces blur. She counts because counting is how you carve a path through a system designed to keep you still. Morning returns again. The manager is sharp-eyed now. Perhaps she senses something. Perhaps she simply enjoys vigilance. The manager checks on the girls more often. She asks questions. She watches hands. She watches where eyes go. She watches when people speak to each other. A woman keeps her face blank. She keeps her words short. She keeps her movements ordinary. Ordinary is camouflage. The new girl saves coins when she can, tiny amounts. A coin slipped into cloth. A coin tucked into a crack in the wall. A coin hidden under a loose stone. She learns to move like a thief in her own life because Rome has made her into one. The days repeat. But under the repetition, a plan grows. One evening, the city is louder than usual. A festival, a procession, music from a nearby street, drunken singing, the kind of noise that makes officials tired and makes crowds thick. The manager drinks a little, not enough to be foolish, just enough to soften her attention. The bouncer is distracted by a dispute at the door. A group of men tries to enter too late. The manager argues, the bouncer steps forward, the men protest. The corridor fills with raised voices, nothing dramatic, just enough chaos to create a crack. Our woman catches the girl's eye. The girl's face is pale but steady. They have talked about this, not in long conversations, in short instructions, over basins, over bread, in corridor whispers. They have chosen this night because Rome is busy with itself. A woman moves toward the manager with a small request, something ordinary. She says a client upstairs is refusing to pay. She says the client is making trouble. The manager's attention snaps upward. Money trouble is the manager's favorite kind of trouble to solve. The manager goes. The bouncer follows. The corridor empties slightly. The girl slips toward the back stair. Our woman walks the other way, casual, as if she is going to fetch water. The girl's hand touches the wall as she descends, step by step, quiet as breath. At the bottom, there is a side door. The side door is usually locked. Tonight it is not fully locked, because someone forgot, because someone is tired, because the city is noisy, because routines, even cruel ones, sometimes slip. The girl's fingers close around the handle. She pauses, listening. Footsteps upstairs, voices, the manager arguing, the bouncer's heavy step. No one in the corridor below. She opens the door. Cold night air hits her face like a slap. She steps out. And in that moment, she is just a girl in a dark street, not a category, not a debt, not an entry in a ledger, just a body moving through Rome. A woman still inside counts to 10 in her head, slow and steady. Then she turns calmly and begins to walk toward the stairs as if she has simply remembered something she forgot, and her voice, low and even, begins to form the next lie she will need to tell, the next ordinary explanation, the next calm sentence that keeps the manager's eyes elsewhere. And she is still shaping that sentence when the manager appears at the landing above, face tight with irritation, and calls down asking where the new girl has gone. And our woman lifts her gaze with practiced calm and begins to answer, starting with the soft words that the girl was just here a moment ago. Perhaps she went to fetch water, perhaps she went to the basin, perhaps she went to clean the room, and her sentence drifts on, smooth and believable, as she offers possibilities that sound ordinary enough to satisfy for a heartbeat. While outside, in the cold air of the street, the new girl moves quickly, not running, because running attracts eyes. Walking fast enough to be purposeful, slow enough to be invisible, and she keeps her head down and turns into the noise of the festival and disappears into the crowd, and Rome, enormous and distracted, swallows her without comment, while inside the house the manager's voice sharpens and begins to call names, and our woman keeps her face blank and her voice calm as she continues speaking, still offering ordinary explanations, still buying time with words, still holding the manager's attention just long enough for the girl to get farther, and she is still speaking when the manager snaps that someone has left the side door unlatched, and the bouncer moves, heavy and fast now, and the house's quiet order turns into a focused search, and our woman's heart keeps a steady beat as she listens, and she begins to add, in the same calm tone, that perhaps the girl will return, perhaps she only stepped out briefly, perhaps she became frightened by a client. Perhaps she is hiding, and the manager's eyes narrow, and the manager's jaw tightens, and the manager says coldly that the girl will not go far, because the girl owes coin, and coin has a way of pulling people back, and our woman nods as if she agrees, while inside her mind she counts the girl's route, counts the turns they discussed, counts the streets that are safest, counts the places where crowds are thick enough to hide her face, and she keeps counting while the manager orders the bouncer to search. And the bouncer goes, and the night outside continues to roar with festival noise, and somewhere in that noise, the girl keeps walking and walking and walking, holding her 3 hidden coins like a tiny heartbeat in her palm, and she is still walking when she reaches a narrow alley lit by a single wavering lamp, and she pauses, breath quick, listening for footsteps behind her, and she forces herself to slow down, to look ordinary, to become part of the city rather than a fleeing target. And she steps forward again and disappears deeper into Rome, while inside the house our woman keeps her face calm and says softly that if the girl is gone, then at least the inspector cannot find her, and the manager glares at her as if she has spoken blasphemy, and the manager mutters that inspectors can always find someone if paid, and our woman lowers her eyes and says nothing, because saying nothing is sometimes the only safe way to keep a secret intact, and the house continues its search. And the festival noise outside keeps rising and falling like waves, and our woman stands still in the corridor, breathing evenly, waiting, listening, pretending to be merely tired, merely ordinary, merely another woman in the house, while somewhere beyond the walls the girl's footsteps fade into the city's endless movement, and the night, for once, gives someone back, and our woman, holding her calm like a shield, begins to speak again when the manager demands answers, and she starts quietly, with the simple line that the city is large, and people vanish in it all the time, and the manager's eyes harden, and she replies that people vanish only when someone lets them, and our woman's mouth opens to answer, and she begins to say, in the same steady tone, that sometimes the city simply forgets to notice. And she is still saying forgets to notice when the manager turns away, furious, and storms downstairs, and the corridor empties, and our woman stands alone for a moment, listening to the distant roar of the festival, listening to the house settling back into its tense quiet, and she exhales once, slow and controlled, and in that exhale there is no triumph, no celebration, just the faint release of a plan executed, and she turns toward her room to wash her hands again, because washing is what she does when she cannot wash away what she has just done, and she reaches the basin and dips the cloth, and the water ripples, and she begins to wipe her fingers. And her voice, barely above a whisper, begins to form a dry little thought meant for no one at all, as she murmurs that Rome will build another wall tomorrow and call it order, and the city will praise itself, and the people inside the walls will keep paying the price, and she is still murmuring the price when the cloth drags across her knuckles and she pauses, and in the pause she imagines, briefly, the girl somewhere in the crowd, breathing cold air, walking without permission. And she lets herself hold that image for one quiet second longer than usual, and then she lowers her eyes back to the basin and continues wiping, because the house is still here, the manager is still here, the debts are still here, and morning will come whether she wants it to or not. and she is still wiping when a knock sounds at the door downstairs, and the manager's voice answers, and the house tenses again, and our woman lifts her head, listening. As a familiar voice outside calls out that there has been a complaint, that there has been disorder, that officials are concerned, and our woman's stomach tightens as she realizes the escape has already become expensive, and she begins to step toward the corridor, her mind already calculating the next fee, the next lie, the next calm sentence she will need to keep the house from breaking apart. And she is still calculating when the manager turns and calls for her, and her mouth opens to answer. And her voice begins, low and even, with the words that, of course, everything can be arranged, and she steps forward into the lamplight as the door opens and another official's silhouette fills the entryway, and she watches his eyes scan the house, and she prepares once more to pay for silence with coin and calm, and she begins to speak again, starting with the polite greeting that keeps men like him comfortable. And she is still greeting him when he smiles faintly and says that he has heard a girl went missing tonight, and that missing girls tend to become everyone's problem, and our woman keeps her face blank as she begins to reply, starting with the careful line that girls move on all the time in Rome, that the city is large, that the house cannot be responsible for every wandering choice, and she is still saying wandering choice when the official's smile widens slightly. And he replies that the city becomes very interested in wandering choices when there are debts unpaid, and our woman feels the trap tightening again, soft and legal, and she opens her mouth to answer, and her sentence begins to form as she says, very quietly, that debts can be settled, and that discretion is always worth a fair price, and she is still saying fair price when the official steps fully inside, his sandals scraping the stone floor like a slow, deliberate warning, and the manager's posture stiffens beside him, her fingers twitching as if she wants to snatch back every coin she's ever counted. The house, already weary from the night's chaos, seems to lean in closer, walls holding their breath, lamps flickering, as if debating whether to stay lit or abandon the scene altogether. A woman keeps her voice steady, her words weaving the familiar web of negotiation, because negotiation is the city's secret language, the one spoken in doorways and back rooms, the one that turns threats into transactions and power into something you can buy off for a while. She says calmly that the girl was not missing, not really, that girls come and go in Rome like shadows at dusk, that debts are fluid things, like the Tiber's water, and that surely a man of his standing understands the value of letting small matters dissolve into the night. The official listens, his head tilted slightly, eyes half-lidded in that practiced boredom that masks calculation, and he replies, in a tone as smooth as oiled marble, that small matters have a way of growing when ignored, that the law has long arms, and that arms like that reach farther when motivated by the right incentives. The manager interjects then, her voice sharper than usual, offering a cup of wine, offering a seat, offering the kind of hospitality that smells like desperation wrapped in courtesy, because the manager knows that officials like this one are not here for justice, they are here for the quiet satisfaction of making someone else count their coins twice. The bouncer stands near the wall, his bulk a silent promise of escalation if words fail, but words rarely fail completely in Rome. They bend, they twist, they buy time until muscle becomes necessary. A woman watches the official's face, noting the faint lines around his mouth that suggest he smiles only when he wins, and she begins to reach for her hidden coins again, the ones she saved not for escape, but for moments exactly like this, because survival is a series of small purchases, each one delaying the inevitable just a little longer. He accepts the wine but not the seat, sipping slowly as if tasting for poison, and he says softly that the girl's absence could be overlooked, that records can be adjusted, that complaints can evaporate like morning mist if the house shows proper respect for the city's order. Our woman nods, her expression unchanging, and she places the coins on the table one by one, the clink echoing in the quiet room like a reluctant confession, and the official's fingers close around them with the casual grace of someone collecting tribute from a conquered province. He does not thank her, thanks are for equals, and he warns in that same mild voice that Rome remembers debts better than faces, that the girl should not be seen causing trouble elsewhere, that the house should maintain its discretion, and then he turns, his cloak swirling slightly, and steps back into the night, the door closing behind him with a thud that feels like the end of a chapter, but is really just a pause in the endless scroll. The manager rounds on our woman the moment he's gone, eyes flashing with the kind of anger that comes from fear narrowly avoided, and she hisses that this is the last time, that the girl was a liability, that our woman's meddling has cost them too much, that loyalty is fine but profit is the god they worship here, and if she wants to play savior, she can do it on the streets with the beggars and the ghosts. Our woman stands still, absorbing the words like rain on stone, not arguing, not defending, because arguments are luxuries for people whose lives aren't measured in basin water and bruises, and she simply nods, murmuring that the house is intact, that business will continue, that tomorrow will bring new clients with new coins to replace the old ones. The manager snorts, turning back to her ledger, her fingers scratching marks with extra force, as if punishing the wax for the night's expenses, and the bouncer relaxes his shoulders, retreating to his corner like a shadow folding itself away. Upstairs, the corridor is empty now, the new girl's room bare, her absence a small void that the house will fill by morning with another face, another story, another debt waiting to be written. Our woman climbs the stairs slowly, her legs heavy with the day's repetitions, and she enters her own narrow space, closing the door softly, leaning against it for a moment, as if testing whether it truly locks from the inside. She washes her hands one final time, the water cold and sparse, the cloth worn thin from too many uses, and as she wipes her skin she thinks, in that dry, quiet way her mind has perfected, that Rome will wake tomorrow with its temples gleaming and its senators orating about virtue, while the real city, the one of basins and bargains and bruised throats, keeps turning on the labor of people like her, invisible and indispensable, consuming itself one small escape at a time. She lies down on the thin mattress, staring at the ceiling where shadows play from the dying lamp below, and in the half-dark she allows herself a single, private thought. The girl is free, or freer than before, walking somewhere under the same moon, perhaps toward a baker's stall or a servant's quarter or a quiet alley where names don't matter, and that thought, fragile as it is, settles in her chest like a coin hidden away, not for spending, but for remembering that even in Rome's endless grip, cracks appear and sometimes people slip through. She closes her eyes, breathing steady, knowing the jug and the basin and the first impatient voice will come with dawn. But for now, in this sliver of night, she dreams not of locked doors, but of open streets, wide and empty, and she is still dreaming when the city's distant hum lulls her into sleep, and Rome, indifferent as always, carries on around her, waiting for another day to begin its slow, relentless chew.